I had everything money could buy, but my heart was bankrupt. Then she walked in, determined, brilliant, and unimpressed by my wealth. I pushed her away, afraid to feel again. But sometimes, the person who refuses to give up on you becomes the one who saves you. Money can't buy happiness. That's what they say. But when you have enough of it to buy anything your heart desires, you start to believe the saying is just something poor people tell themselves to feel better. That was me 5 years ago. James Thompson, 38 years old, self-made millionaire with an empire spanning real estate, tech investments, and luxury hospitality. From the outside looking in, I had it all. The penthouse overlooking the city, the collection of cars that I barely drove, the designer wardrobe, the black Amex card that never declined. Success was my religion, and I worshipped at its altar religiously. Every morning began the same way. Alarm at 5 a.m. Workout with my personal trainer in my home gym. Breakfast prepared by my private chef. Protein, no carbs. Shower in my marble bathroom bigger than most people's apartments. Suit tailored to perfection. Then the elevator down to where my driver waited to take me to the office. Efficient, controlled, empty. I'd built walls so high around myself that I couldn't even remember what it felt like to be truly vulnerable with another person. Vulnerability was for the weak, and weakness was something I'd purged from my system years ago along with carbohydrates and genuine laughter. The last time I'd opened my heart, it nearly destroyed me, and I'd made a solemn vow never to make that mistake again. Love is a liability. I used to tell the few people who dared to bring up my perpetual bachelor status. Show me a man in love, and I'll show you a man making compromised business decisions. I believed this with every fiber of my being. Love was inefficient, messy, and ultimately destructive. I'd seen it crush my father after my mother left, watched it destroy promising careers when executives chose family over opportunity. Not me. I had eliminated that weakness from my operating system. My days were filled with meetings, deals, and decisions that made me richer by the hour. My nights alternated between networking events, superficial encounters with beautiful women who wanted nothing more than a story to tell, or solitary evenings with expensive scotch and spreadsheets. I told myself this was freedom. This was success. This was what winning looked like. But sometimes, in those quiet moments between midnight and dawn, when the city below finally slept and even my phone stopped demanding attention, I'd stand at my floor-to-ceiling windows and feel something hollow echoing inside me. An emptiness no acquisition had ever filled. A question I refused to acknowledge. What was the point of it all? I never imagined that the answer would walk into my life in a simple black dress and no-nonsense attitude, completely unimpressed by everything I'd built. I never thought salvation would come in the form of a woman who saw through every defense I'd constructed and refused to be intimidated by the walls around my heart. Stay with me as I share how the most unexpected person broke through my walls and taught me that the greatest investment isn't in stocks or real estate, but in opening your heart again. This is the story I never thought I'd tell. The story of how I learned that the true measure of wealth isn't in your bank account, but in your capacity to love and be loved in return. I wasn't always this way. The empire I built started with nothing but ambition and the desperate need to prove everyone wrong. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood with parents who struggled to make ends meet, I watched my father work himself to exhaustion at a job he hated, all to provide for us. Then one day, my mother decided she'd had enough of the struggle. She left us for someone with deeper pockets and a bigger house. I was 15. My father crumbled before my eyes. The man who had taught me to stand tall became a shadow, drowning his heartbreak in cheap whiskey night after night. "This is what love does to a man," he'd slur, pointing a shaky finger at me. "Remember this, James. Never give someone the power to destroy you." Those words etched themselves into my soul, becoming the foundation of everything I would later become. I graduated top of my class, worked 3 jobs to put myself through college, and landed an entry-level position at a prestigious investment firm. While others my age were out building relationships and creating memories, I was analyzing market trends and learning to spot opportunities others missed. My colleagues called me the machine for my relentless work ethic and emotional detachment. I took it as a compliment. At 27, I made my first million. By 30, I had my own company. The climb was intoxicating. Each acquisition, each successful deal feeding the void inside me. For a brief moment in my early 30s, I thought I'd found someone who understood me. Alexandra was brilliant, ambitious, and as driven as I was. I let my guard down, believing I'd found a partner who valued success as much as I did. I was wrong. She was playing a longer game. After 2 years together, I discovered she'd been feeding information to my biggest competitor. Pillow talk turned corporate espionage. The betrayal cost me a major deal and nearly tanked a venture I'd spent years building. As I signed the divorce papers 6 months later, I felt nothing but cold relief that I'd protected most of my assets with a prenup she hadn't read carefully enough. Love is for fools, I told my business partner Marcus over drinks the night the divorce was finalized. It's a biological trap designed to cloud judgment and compromise rational thinking. Marcus, happily married for 15 years, just shook his head with that pitying look I'd come to despise. After Alexandra, I perfected the art of superficial connections. I dated models, actresses, and socialites, women who understood the arrangement without it being explicitly stated. 2 months was my limit. Enough time to enjoy their company, not enough time for expectations to form. My last assistant had it down to a science. Reservations at Michelin-starred restaurants, weekend trips to my vacation properties, and precisely timed deliveries of jewelry as parting gifts when I moved on. My homes were showcases of modern luxury, designed by top architects and featured in glossy magazines. Yet I rarely spent time in any room besides the bedroom, home office, and occasionally the kitchen. The art on my walls was selected for its investment value, not because it moved me. Even my sheets were chosen for their thread count rather than comfort. People envied my life. I could see it in their eyes at charity galas and industry events. They wanted what I had, never realizing that what I had was nothing but a beautifully constructed facade. Success had become my identity, money my only measure of worth. I'd convinced myself this was happiness, or at least as close to it as reality allowed. What I didn't realize was how completely I'd numbed myself to anything real. Until the day exhaustion caught up with me, and for the first time in 15 years, I missed a board meeting because my body simply shut down. That was the first crack in the foundation, the universe sending me a message I wasn't yet ready to hear. I first saw her on a Tuesday morning. Nothing special about that day. Another meeting, another acquisition target. Thomson Enterprises was looking to diversify into sustainable technology, and Horizon Solutions was exactly the kind of company we wanted to absorb. Small enough to acquire without draining resources, innovative enough to give us credibility in a market increasingly obsessed with environmental consciousness. The meeting was supposed to be with the CEO, a man named David Chen. I'd done my homework, knew his background, his weaknesses, how much pressure his investors were putting on him to scale quickly. I was ready to offer him just enough to make refusing difficult, but not enough to impact my quarterly projections. But when I walked into the conference room, flanked by my usual team of lawyers and analysts, it wasn't David Chen sitting at the head of the table. It was her. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Amara Lewis, Chief Innovation Officer at Horizon." She stood, confident, composed, wearing a simple black blazer over a white shirt. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry, just intelligent eyes that met mine without a hint of intimidation. "David sends his apologies. He's been called away on a family emergency." I remember being irritated. This wasn't the plan. "Family emergency," I repeated, not bothering to hide my skepticism. "How convenient." Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened. "His daughter was hospitalized this morning, but I assure you I'm fully authorized to discuss Thomson Enterprises' interest in our company." I sat down, studying her as my team arranged themselves around me. She was beautiful, yes, but not in the manufactured way I was accustomed to. Her beauty was unadorned, natural, and utterly irrelevant to the matter at hand. "Let's not waste time then," I said, nodding to my CFO to distribute our initial offer. "I'm sure you'll find our proposal generous." What happened next took me completely by surprise. Amara glanced at the document, then slid it back across the table without even opening it. "Before we discuss numbers, Mr. Thompson, I'd like to understand exactly what value you see in Horizon beyond our patents and market position." I remember smiling, the cold, practiced smile I used when someone was trying to negotiate from a position of weakness. "Ms. Lewis, the value is quite simple. Your technology has potential. Your company lacks the resources to realize that potential. We have those resources. What we lack is not resources, Mr. Thompson. What we lack is the ruthless efficiency that would allow us to compromise our founding principles for faster growth." She leaned forward slightly. Horizon wasn't built to be absorbed by a conglomerate with no genuine interest in environmental sustainability. I felt a flash of genuine anger, something I rarely allowed myself to feel in business settings. "You think I came here without understanding what your company does? 3 patents for solar energy storage, innovative water filtration technology, and compostable packaging materials that actually work. I know exactly what Horizon is." "You know what we make," she corrected me. "You don't know who we are." For the next hour, she didn't just present Horizon's portfolio. She told the story of each innovation, the problems they were trying to solve, the communities already benefiting from their work. Not once did she mention profit margins or market share. By the end, even my cynical team seemed captivated. I wasn't. Or at least I told myself I wasn't. "Very inspiring, Ms. Lewis, but passion doesn't pay investors." She gathered her materials calmly. "No, Mr. Thompson, it doesn't. Results do. And our results speak for themselves." She handed me a folder, not our untouched offer, but Horizon's own counterproposal. "We're open to a partnership, not an acquisition. If that interests you, we can continue this conversation." As she walked out, leaving my team murmuring among themselves, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The unsettling sensation of having met someone who couldn't be easily categorized or dismissed. Someone who had looked at James Thompson, with all his wealth and power, and been completely unimpressed. I should have walked away, should have targeted another company, one with leadership more susceptible to the kind of pressure I knew how to apply. Instead, I found myself saying, "Schedule another meeting. I want to see their operation firsthand." It was just business, I told myself. Just a different approach to the same end goal. I had no idea I had just met the woman who would dismantle everything I thought I knew about myself. I've never been one to change course easily. When I want something, I pursue it relentlessly until it's mine. Horizon Solutions was no different, or so I told myself. Their counter-proposal was actually decent, showing business acumen I hadn't expected from a company that emphasized purpose over profit. But I wasn't interested in partnerships. I wanted control. Which is why, 1 week later, I found myself touring Horizon's modest headquarters in a renovated warehouse on the edge of the city's newly revitalized industrial district. No marble lobbies or crystal chandeliers here, just open workspace, abundant natural light, and walls covered with both patents and photos of communities using their technologies. "Our team works in collaborative pods rather than departments," Amara explained as she led me through the space. "No assistants, no entourage, just the 2 of us." I'd insisted on coming alone, telling myself it was strategic. We find it fosters innovation and prevents the silo mentality that plagues most corporations. "Efficient use of space," I commented, deliberately focusing on the practical rather than the philosophical. "Though I imagine it gets chaotic." She smiled, not the practiced smile of someone trying to impress, but something genuine. "Creativity often looks like chaos to the untrained eye, Mr. Thompson." Throughout the tour, I kept waiting for the facade to crack. for the idealism to reveal itself as marketing, for Amara to drop the principled act and start talking like every other business person I'd encountered, in terms of profit margins and market share. She never did. Instead, she introduced me to engineers who spoke passionately about the communities using their water filtration systems in drought-stricken regions, to researchers who had taken pay cuts from corporate jobs because they believed in Horizon's mission, to David Chen himself, who had returned to work despite his daughter still recovering in the hospital, because, as he put it, what we're doing here matters too much. I found it all vaguely unsettling. And yet, I couldn't identify the angle, the manipulation. These people genuinely seemed to believe in what they were building. "You're wondering if it's all for show," Amara said later as we sat in their modest conference room reviewing technical specifications. Her perceptiveness caught me off guard. "I'm wondering how you stay solvent," I countered, recovering quickly. "Idealism is expensive. So is soulless corporate expansion." She met my gaze directly. "We've been profitable for 3 years, Mr. Thompson. Not the kind of profits that fund penthouse apartments and private jets, but sustainable growth that allows us to fulfill our mission while taking care of our people." "There's nothing wrong with penthouses and private jets if you've earned them," I said, feeling strangely defensive. "No," she agreed, surprising me again. "There's nothing inherently wrong with wealth. It's what that wealth costs you that matters." Something in her tone made me look up from the documents. "And what do you think it's cost me, Ms. Lewis?" For the first time, I saw hesitation cross her face. "That's not for me to say. But you've clearly formed an opinion. I'm curious what assumptions you've made about someone you've just met." She considered me for a long moment. "I think success can become a prison of its own making. The higher the walls you build around yourself, the harder it is to remember why you started building in the first place." Her words hit uncomfortably close to something I didn't want to examine. I changed the subject back to business, but the thought lingered, an unwelcome guest in the back of my mind. Over the next few weeks, what was supposed to be a straightforward acquisition became a complex negotiation. I found myself in meeting after meeting with Horizon's team, always with Amara present, always challenging my assumptions, always pushing for terms that protected their mission even if it meant less profit. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. I started looking forward to those meetings, to the intellectual challenge Amara presented, to her unflinching honesty that cut through the usual corporate doublespeak. I even caught myself smiling at her quick wit and unabashed passion. Real smiles, not the strategic ones I deployed like weapons. "You should do that more often," she said once, after I'd laughed at her devastatingly accurate impression of a particularly pompous venture capitalist we both knew. "Do what?" "Laugh like you mean it." I felt strangely exposed, as if she'd caught me in a moment of weakness. I retreated behind my usual armor of cool professionalism, but the damage was done. A crack had formed in the wall I'd so carefully constructed. By the time we finalized the deal, a partnership, not an acquisition, much to my team's surprise, I had to acknowledge, if only to myself, that my interest in Horizon Solutions had become entangled with my fascination with Amara Lewis. It wasn't romantic. I wouldn't allow it to be. But it was something I hadn't experienced before. Genuine respect. As we signed the final papers, she looked at me across the table. "This is just the beginning, you know." I had no idea how right she was. 6 months into our partnership with Horizon, I found myself more involved than I'd initially planned. What started as quarterly review meetings had somehow evolved into bi-weekly strategy sessions and regular site visits. I told myself it was just good business, protecting my investment, ensuring the integration was smooth. But the truth, which I barely acknowledged even to myself, was that I was drawn to the energy of Horizon and its people, to their purpose, to her. Amara had become a fixed point in my otherwise predictable life. Our conversations regularly extended beyond business into debates about everything from environmental policy to the ethics of AI. She challenged me intellectually in ways I hadn't experienced in years. Never deferential, Never intimidated, always authentic. The crisis came on an ordinary Tuesday. I was in my office reviewing acquisition targets when Marcus burst in without knocking, something he never did. "They're pulling out," he said, his face grim. "Clearwater Technologies. They're backing out of the deal and going with Rosenthal instead." I felt the familiar cold focus descend. Clearwater was supposed to be the crown jewel of our expansion into sustainable infrastructure. A year of negotiations, millions in preliminary development. "That's not possible. We're signing next week." Their board voted this morning. Apparently, Rosenthal offered them government contract connections we couldn't match. For the next 48 hours, I was the version of myself I knew best. Ruthless, calculating, working around the clock to salvage the situation. When that failed, I shifted to damage control, calling in favors, threatening legal action, anything to mitigate the blow to Thompson Enterprises. By Thursday evening, I was running on caffeine and fury, alone in my office at midnight when my private elevator announced an arrival. Amara stepped out, holding a file folder. "Security called me," she said by way of explanation. "They were concerned you haven't left the building in 2 days." I wasn't aware my movements were being monitored. I snapped, irritated by the intrusion. "If you have business concerns, they can wait until morning." She set the folder on my desk without responding to my tone. "The Clearwater situation. I may have a solution." I looked at her with suspicion. "How do you even know about that?" "It's my job to know what affects our partnership," she said simply. "And unlike most of your associates, I actually read the industry reports beyond the executive summaries." Too exhausted to maintain my usual walls, I opened the folder. Inside was a detailed analysis of Clearwater's technology compared to a smaller company called Blue Horizon, with projections showing how Horizon's existing patents could create a superior integrated system. Blue Horizon is struggling financially, but their core technology is actually more advanced, she explained. With our combined resources, we could not only replace what Clearwater offered, but potentially leapfrog them within 18 months. I studied the documents, finding no flaws in her analysis. "Why would you do this? This has nothing to do with our existing partnership." She was quiet for a moment. "Because despite what you might think, I don't enjoy seeing someone's hard work destroyed by corporate politics. Even yours." Something in her voice made me really look at her for the first time since she'd arrived. She looked tired, too, her usual crisp appearance slightly rumpled. "You've been working on this since you heard about Clearwater." She shrugged. "Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places. Isn't that what partnerships are supposed to be about?" In that moment, with my defenses lowered by exhaustion and the shock of someone showing genuine concern for me, not my wealth, not my connections, just me, I felt something shift inside, a warmth I'd forgotten how to feel. "Thank you," I said, the words unfamiliar on my tongue. What happened next caught me completely off guard. We worked through the night side by side, restructuring the strategy. As dawn broke, I found myself sharing the real story behind the Clearwater deal. How personal it had been for me. How it connected to environmental damage I'd witnessed in my hometown as a child. Things I'd never told anyone. She listened without judgment, asked questions without ulterior motives, and somewhere in those vulnerable hours, I realized with absolute clarity that I was in dangerous territory. I was starting to care what Amara Lewis thought of me, starting to value her opinion not just professionally, but personally. When our revised strategy ultimately succeeded, with Blue Horizon integrated into our portfolio and the market responding positively, I did what I always did when emotions threatened to complicate my carefully controlled life. I pulled back, limited our interactions to formal meetings, assigned a senior VP to be Horizon's main contact. I was protecting myself, falling back on old patterns. What I didn't expect was for Amara to confront me directly, showing up at my penthouse one evening, somehow bypassing the security protocols that kept the rest of the world at bay. "You're hiding," she said, standing in my minimalist living room, looking both out of place and somehow exactly where she belonged. The question is, are you hiding from me or from yourself? And just like that, the walls I'd spent a lifetime building began to tremble. I don't hide from anything or anyone, I said coldly, maintaining the distance between us, the familiar defensiveness rising like armor. I'm simply prioritizing other projects that require my attention. Amara looked around my penthouse, taking in the pristine surfaces, the expensive but impersonal art, the stunning view that I barely noticed anymore. "Beautiful cage you've built for yourself," she said quietly. "I didn't invite you here to psychoanalyze my living arrangements." I moved to pour myself a drink, needing something to do with my hands. "How did you get past security?" "Your assistant Marcus let me up. He seems to think we need to talk." She remained standing, refusing the silent invitation to sit, to normalize this intrusion. "He cares about you, you know, more than you allow yourself to realize. Marcus works for me. That's the extent of our relationship." Even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Marcus had been with me for over a decade, had seen me through the worst times. Is that what you tell yourself about everyone who gets close? That they're just fulfilling a transactional role? I felt a flare of genuine anger. "You don't know anything about my life. I know you're brilliant at business and terrible at letting people in. I know you work until exhaustion rather than face the silence of this beautiful empty apartment. I know you helped fund a clean water initiative in Sierra Leone last year anonymously, even though claiming credit would have been excellent PR." Her eyes held mine. "I know there's more to James Thompson than the armor he wears." The fact that she knew about Sierra Leone, a private project I'd told no one about, left me momentarily speechless. "What do you want from me, Amara?" "Honesty, just that." She took a step closer. "Why are you running from whatever started happening between us?" "Nothing was happening," I said automatically, the lie bitter on my tongue. "For a brilliant man, you can be remarkably dense." Her directness, as always, cut through my defenses. "Something changed after the Clearwater situation. We connected, as people, not just business associates. And it terrified you." The accuracy of her assessment felt like a physical blow. "My personal life isn't relevant to our business arrangement. Everything about you is connected, James. The man who makes the business decisions is the same man who can't allow himself to form real connections. It's all part of the same broken system." "Broken?" I laughed, a harsh sound even to my own ears. "I've built an empire worth billions. I'd hardly call that broken." "An empire where you're completely alone." Her voice softened. "What happened to you, James? Who taught you that you had to choose between success and genuine connection?" The question hit too close to the painful truth I'd buried decades ago. Images flashed through my mind. My mother walking out, my father collapsing into himself, my ex-wife's cold calculation. The vulnerable parts of me I'd systematically eliminated, convinced they were weaknesses I couldn't afford. "We're done here," I said, moving toward the elevator. "I'll have someone else manage the Horizon partnership going forward." Instead of leaving, she reached out and touched my arm, the first time she'd ever initiated physical contact between us. Running away again? That's not the James Thompson I've come to know. Something inside me fractured, years of carefully controlled emotions suddenly threatening to break free. "You don't know me," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You've created some fictional version of me that fits whatever narrative you want to believe." "I see you more clearly than you see yourself," she countered. "I see someone brilliant and driven, but so afraid of being hurt again that he's cut himself off from anything real. I see someone who uses success to avoid vulnerability. I see someone worthy of more than he allows himself to have." "Stop." The word came out ragged, almost pleading. "Why?" "Because I'm getting too close to the truth? Because it's easier to push me away than admit you might actually care what happens between us? Because you're wrong. The words exploded from me. Because caring is a liability I can't afford. Because everyone I've ever let in has proven that trust is for fools. Because I built all of this by not needing anyone. The silence that followed my outburst felt deafening. I turned away, hands braced against the window, staring out at the city lights below, hating the tremor I could feel in my own body. When Amara spoke again, her voice was gentle but firm. That's the difference between us, James. You see connection as weakness. I see it as the only thing that gives any of this meaning. I couldn't look at her, couldn't bear the compassion I knew I'd see in her eyes. You should go. Is that really what you want? No, I wanted to say. Stay. Help me understand why you've gotten past defenses no one else has even recognized. Help me understand why I can't stop thinking about you. Instead, I said nothing. I heard her sigh, then the soft sound of her footsteps moving away. At the elevator, she paused. When you decide you're ready to stop hiding, you know where to find me. But I won't wait forever, James. Some opportunities don't come around twice. After she left, I did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I completely fell apart. The grief I'd never properly processed, the loneliness I'd refused to acknowledge, all of it crashed through the walls I'd built. I spent the night on the floor of my perfect penthouse, finally facing the truth that success had been my refuge, not my salvation. The morning after, hollow-eyed but somehow lighter, I made a call I should have made years ago. To a therapist Marcus had been recommending since my divorce. It was the first step on a journey I'd been avoiding my entire adult life. And then, when I could stand it no longer, I went to find Amara. Finding Amara wasn't as simple as I'd expected. She wasn't at Horizon's offices, and David Chen merely gave me an appraising look before sharing that she was taking personal time. Some things matter more than work, he said pointedly, a lesson he himself had learned when his daughter was hospitalized. I felt the implied rebuke, and for once, accepted it as deserved. Eventually, I tracked her to a community garden in a neighborhood I'd driven past countless times but never actually seen. She was kneeling in soil, working alongside a group of children, teaching them about growing their own food. So completely in her element that she didn't notice me standing awkwardly at the edge of the plots. Designer shoes collecting dust, feeling more out of place than I ever had in boardrooms facing hostile takeovers. When she finally saw me, her expression gave nothing away. She excused herself from the children and walked over, wiping her hands on well-worn jeans. "This is unexpected," she said simply. "I'm trying something new," I replied. "Not running away." We walked along the perimeter of the garden, an unlikely pair, her in casual clothes smudged with earth, me in a bespoke suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. I'd rehearsed what to say a dozen times on the way over, but now that I was here, the carefully prepared words felt inadequate. "I started therapy," I finally said, the admission itself a kind of surrender. "3 sessions so far." She nodded, waiting for more, not making it easy. I didn't deserve easy. "You were right," I continued. "About all of it. I've spent my life building walls so high that I can't even remember what it feels like to live without them. Success became my identity because it was the only thing that never disappointed me. And now?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Now I'm realizing that what I thought was strength was actually fear. Fear disguised as ambition, as focus, as strategic thinking. I've been running my entire adult life." We reached a bench at the far end of the garden, overlooking a small pond where ducks glided peacefully across the surface. She sat, and after a moment's hesitation, I joined her. "Why are you telling me this, James?" The directness of her question demanded an equally direct answer. "Because you saw through me when no one else could, or when no one else bothered to try, and because—" I paused, struggling with words that had never been part of my vocabulary. "Because I think I might be falling in love with you, and that terrifies me more than losing every cent I've ever earned." Her eyes widened slightly, the first time I'd ever truly surprised her. "Love isn't a business transaction, James. You can't approach it with risk assessments and projected outcomes." "I know," I said quietly. "That's what scares me. I don't know how to do this. Any of it." What happened next would change the course of my life. Instead of the rejection I half expected, deserved even, she took my hand. A simple gesture, but one that anchored me in a way nothing ever had. "No one really knows how to do this," she said. "We're all just figuring it out as we go. The difference is whether we're willing to try, even knowing we might fail." That conversation marked the beginning of the most profound transformation of my life. Amara didn't rush me, didn't demand grand gestures or immediate change. Instead, she simply made space for me to discover who I could be when I wasn't defined solely by success and control. I continued therapy, unpacking decades of buried pain and self-protective patterns. Some sessions left me raw and exhausted. Others brought unexpected clarity about how my past had shaped my approach to everything: business, relationships, even my definition of success itself. Slowly, I began to change how I operated in every aspect of life. At work, I started actually listening to my team, valuing their input beyond just how it affected the bottom line. I initiated a company-wide review of our business practices, implementing ethical guidelines that sometimes meant walking away from profitable but questionable opportunities. Marcus, who had seen every version of me over the years, approached me after a meeting where I'd scrapped a potentially lucrative development because of environmental concerns. "Who are you and what have you done with James Thompson?" he asked, only half joking. "I'm still figuring that out," I answered honestly. The most profound changes happened in my personal life. Amara and I built our relationship slowly, deliberately. I learned to share not just my thoughts, but my feelings, a vocabulary I was still developing. I discovered that vulnerability, while terrifying, also created possibilities for connection I'd never imagined. My penthouse, once a showcase of success but never really a home, gradually transformed. Books that were actually read, not just displayed. Photos of people, not just achievements. Spaces designed for comfort and conversation, not just to impress. And somewhere along this journey, I realized something fundamental had shifted within me. The relentless drive to acquire more wealth, more properties, more status, had been replaced by a different kind of ambition. I wanted depth over breadth, meaning over accumulation, purpose beyond profit. This doesn't mean I abandoned business. That entrepreneurial spirit remains part of who I am. But now, those same skills that built my empire are being redirected. Together with Amara, we've launched initiatives bringing sustainable technology to communities that need it most. My wealth, once hoarded, now flows more freely into causes that create lasting change. Love I've discovered isn't the weakness I feared. It's been the foundation for a strength I never knew existed. The courage to be imperfect, to fail sometimes, to prioritize what truly matters. To wake each morning next to someone who knows my darkest parts and loves me anyway. To use my resources not just to build higher walls, but to open doors for others. I'm not going to pretend this transformation happened overnight, or that I don't sometimes fall back into old patterns of thinking. Change this fundamental takes time, commitment, and constant awareness. There are days when the old James Thompson resurfaces, guarded, calculating, afraid. But now, when that happens, I have something I never had before. Someone who sees me slip behind those walls and gently calls me back. Someone who reminds me that the richest life isn't measured in assets acquired, but in moments fully lived. Someone whose love saved me not by changing who I am, but by helping me discover who I was always meant to be. Looking back now, I barely recognize the man I was 5 years ago. The James Thompson who measured his worth in acquisitions and assets seems like a stranger to me now. Someone I simultaneously pity and understand. He was doing the best he could with the tools he had, building walls he thought would protect him, never realizing they had become his prison. What Amara gave me wasn't just love in the romantic sense. though that has been a gift beyond measure. What she really offered was permission to be human again, to make mistakes, to need others, to find purpose beyond the next deal or the next million. Her unwavering belief that there was more to me than my carefully constructed facade created space for a different version of myself to emerge, one that had been buried beneath years of protective armor. The transformation hasn't always been easy. There have been moments of backsliding, when fear creeps in and the temptation to retreat behind familiar walls becomes almost overwhelming. Old habits die hard, and the patterns established over decades don't disappear overnight. But now, when I feel myself withdrawing, I have the awareness to recognize it and the courage to choose differently. That's perhaps the most profound change of all. Not that I never struggle, but that I no longer run from the struggle. My definition of success has been completely reimagined. Yes, I still run my companies, still make strategic decisions and value profitability. But now those pursuits exist within a larger framework of purpose and connection. The question isn't just, will this make money? But will this create value for our people, our communities, our world? The most fulfilling moments of my day are no longer closing deals, but coming home to share them with someone who cares about the person beyond the achievements. I've learned that true wealth isn't found in what you possess, but in what possesses your heart. The capacity to love and be loved, to contribute meaningfully to others' lives, to be present without performing. These are the true measures of a rich life. And by those measures, I was bankrupt before Amara walked into my life, no matter what my financial statements might have shown. If you're watching this and recognize yourself in the person I used to be, successful by every external measure but empty inside, protected but isolated, achieving but not truly living, please hear this. The walls you've built to keep pain out are also keeping life out. The control you maintain is also limiting the possibilities for joy. The self-sufficiency you prize is denying you the profound experience of being truly known and accepted by another. Taking that first step toward vulnerability is terrifying. I know because I've taken it. But on the other side of that fear lies everything you've been working for without realizing it. Connection, purpose, peace. Not a perfect life, but a full one. Not a life without challenges, but one where you don't face those challenges alone. If you've built walls around your heart, ask yourself what you're really protecting and what you're missing. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't building an empire, it's letting someone in. Share this with someone who needs to hear that love can find us even when we're hiding from it.